The sound of tiny fingers dancing across piano keys filled the small apartment every afternoon at exactly 4 o'clock. It was a routine that had become as predictable as the sunrise itself. 8-year-old Anya would burst through the front door, her school bag sliding off her shoulder as she raced toward the corner where her grandmother's old upright piano stood like a faithful guardian. The piano wasn't much to look at. Its dark brown wood had faded over the years, and some of the keys had yellowed with age. But to Anya, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. Her grandmother, Elena, had owned it for over 50 years, and the stories it could tell were endless. "Today we work on Chopin," Elena would say, settling into her favorite armchair with a cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. Her weathered hands would gesture gracefully as she spoke, as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Remember, music is not just about hitting the right keys at the right time. It's about feeling every note in your heart. Anya's small apartment in Mariupol was nothing fancy. The walls were painted a simple white, and the furniture was old but well-loved. Her parents worked hard to make ends meet, but they always made sure there was enough money for Anya's piano lessons. They understood that music was more than just a hobby for their daughter. It was her way of speaking to the world. Every day after school, Anya would sit on the wooden bench that wobbled slightly when she pressed the pedals. She would adjust her posture just like her teacher had shown her, place her hands in the correct position, and begin to play. The apartment would transform from a simple living space into something magical. The walls seemed to disappear, and suddenly they weren't just in a small Ukrainian city anymore. They were in concert halls in Vienna, or cozy living rooms in Paris, or anywhere else music could take them. Her grandmother Elena had dreams of becoming a professional pianist when she was young, but life had other plans. She had lived through difficult times, had seen her country change hands more than once, and had learned that sometimes dreams must be put aside for more immediate needs. But watching Anya play, seeing the pure joy on her granddaughter's face, Elena felt like her own dreams were finally coming true. The old woman would close her eyes and listen as Anya worked through her scales, correcting her gently when she hit a wrong note or rushed through a difficult passage. "Patience, little one," Elena would say softly. "The music will wait for you. Take your time and feel each note before you play it." Anya's parents, Pavel and Marina, would often stand in the doorway and watch their daughter practice. They didn't know much about classical music, but they could see how it made their child's face light up. Pavel worked at the local factory, and Marina cleaned offices in the evenings. They were simple people who had simple dreams. They wanted their daughter to have opportunities they never had. The neighborhood where they lived was quiet and friendly. Children played in the courtyard below their second-floor apartment, and neighbors would often stop to chat in the hallways. On warm summer evenings, Anya would open the windows while she practiced, and passers-by would slow down to listen to the beautiful music floating down from above. Mrs. Petrova, who lived across the hall, once told Marina that hearing Anya play made her day brighter. "It's like having our own little concert every afternoon," she said with a smile. "That child has a gift." Anya's music teacher, Mrs. Volkov, was a stern woman who demanded excellence from her students. She had been teaching piano for over 30 years and had seen many talented children come and go. But there was something special about Anya. The child didn't just play the notes, she understood them. She could make the piano sing in ways that surprised even her experienced teacher. "This one has music in her soul," Mrs. Volkov told Elena during one of their monthly meetings. "She doesn't just play with her fingers, she plays with her heart. That's something you cannot teach." The weekly lessons were held in Mrs. Volkov's apartment, which was filled with sheet music and photographs of famous pianists. Anya would walk there every Thursday evening, her music books tucked under her arm, excited to learn new pieces and techniques. She was working on several compositions at once, a Mozart sonata that made her feel light and happy, a Bach invention that challenged her fingers to move independently, and of course, the Chopin waltz that her grandmother loved so much. Winter evenings in Mariupol were long and cold, but inside their warm apartment, music made everything feel cozy and safe. Anya would practice while her mother prepared dinner, filling the kitchen. with melodies that seemed to make even the simplest meal taste better. Her father would sit at the small table, listening while he read the newspaper, sometimes humming along to tunes he had heard so many times they had become part of his own memory. The piano had become the heartbeat of their home. It marked the rhythm of their days and brought the family together in ways that words couldn't. When Anya played happy pieces, everyone smiled. When she worked on slower, more emotional compositions, the whole apartment seemed to pause and listen. Elena would often tell stories about the piano's history while Anya practiced. She had bought it as a young woman, saving every penny she could for months until she had enough money. It had moved with her through different apartments, different cities, and different chapters of her life. It had been her companion through joy and sorrow, celebration and loss. "This piano knows our family's secrets," Elena would say, running her fingers along its smooth surface. "It has heard our laughter and our tears. It has been with us through everything, and it will be with us through everything that comes next." As winter turned to spring in 2022, life in Mariupol continued its normal rhythm. Anya went to school, practiced piano, helped her mother with household chores, and played with her friends in the courtyard. The family made plans for the summer, maybe a trip to visit relatives in the countryside, or perhaps a small vacation by the sea, but sometimes, late at night, the adults would whisper about troubling news they had heard on television. There were tensions growing, political situations that ordinary people couldn't control or fully understand. Pavel and Marina would discuss these things in hushed tones after they thought Anya was asleep, but their daughter could sense their worry even when she couldn't hear their words. Elena, who had lived through difficult times before, would reassure. Whatever happens, we have each other," she would say. "And we have music. As long as we can create something beautiful together, we can get through anything." The old piano stood in its corner, patient and strong, ready to offer comfort through whatever might come. Its keys had been touched by 3 generations of the same family, and each note played on them carried the weight of love, hope, and dreams that refused to be silenced. None of them knew that their peaceful world was about to change forever. None of them could imagine that their beloved piano would soon become a symbol of something much larger than their small family's joy. But for now, in these last precious days of normalcy, music filled their home with warmth and happiness, and that was enough. The first sound came just before dawn on a Thursday morning in late February. Anya woke up thinking it was thunder, but the rumbling didn't stop. It rolled across the sky like a freight train that never passed. She sat up in her small bed listening to the strange noise that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. In the kitchen, her parents were already awake, standing by the window with worried expressions. Marina held her coffee cup with shaking hands, while Pavel kept adjusting the radio, trying to find news stations that weren't full of static. The morning light looked different somehow, grayer and more uncertain than usual. "What's that noise, Papa?" Anya asked, padding into the kitchen in her pajamas and slippers. Pavel lifted her onto his lap and smoothed her hair. "Just some trucks driving by, little bird, nothing to worry about." But his voice carried a weight that made Anya's stomach feel funny, like when she had to perform in front of strangers. Elena emerged from her bedroom, moving slowly with her walking stick. She had lived through difficult times before, and her face showed she understood what the sounds meant even before the radio confirmed it. She sat down heavily in her chair and reached for Anya's hand. "Today we practice piano a little longer than usual," she said quietly. "Music helps when the world gets noisy, but as the days passed, the noise didn't go away. It got closer and louder. Windows in their building began to rattle during the day, and at night, bright flashes would light up the sky like lightning that forgot how to stop." The other families in their apartment building started gathering in the hallways, speaking in hushed voices and sharing whatever news they could find. Mrs. Petrova, from across the hall, knocked on their door one evening with tears in her eyes. Her son lived in another part of the city, and she hadn't been able to reach him by phone for 2 days. Marina invited her in for tea, and the 2 women sat at the kitchen table. comforting each other while the men tried to fix the television. That kept losing its signal. Anya still practiced piano every afternoon, but now the music served a different purpose. Instead of filling their home with joy, it seemed to hold back the scary sounds from outside. When she played Chopin, the explosions in the distance felt farther away. When she worked on her Mozart, her grandmother's worried face would relax. Just a little. Schools closed after the first week. At first, Anya was excited about the unexpected vacation, but she quickly realized this wasn't the fun kind of break from classes. Her friends couldn't come over to play, and she wasn't allowed to go to the courtyard anymore. The building felt smaller each day, and the walls seemed to press closer together. Food became harder to find. Pavel would leave early in the morning, to wait in long lines at stores, often coming home with just a few items that cost much more than they used to. Marina started rationing their meals, giving Anya larger portions while pretending she wasn't hungry herself. Elena barely ate at all, claiming her appetite had disappeared with age. Though everyone knew she was saving food for the rest of them, the electricity began cutting out at random times. Sometimes they would have power for a few hours, sometimes for whole days, and sometimes they would sit in darkness for so long that Anya forgot what electric lights looked like. During these blackouts, Elena would tell stories by candlelight while Anya practiced silent finger exercises on her lap, keeping her muscles ready for when the piano would work again. One morning, Anya woke up to find her parents packing suitcases. Marina was folding clothes with quick, nervous movements, while Pavel gathered important papers and put them in a waterproof bag. They were discussing something in voices too low for Anya to understand, but she caught words like leaving and safe place. And tonight, are we going on a trip? Anya asked, hope creeping into her voice. Maybe they were finally going to visit those relatives in the countryside. Her parents exchanged a look that made Anya's excitement disappear. Marina sat on the bed and pulled her daughter close. We might need to go stay somewhere else for a while, she explained carefully. Just until things get quieter here. But when they asked Elena to pack her belongings, the old woman shook her head firmly. I'm too old to run away, she said, settling deeper into her armchair. This is my home. I've seen troubles before, and they always pass eventually. Pavel knelt beside his mother's chair, taking her frail hands in his. Mama, it's not safe here anymore. The building next to us was hit yesterday. We can't stay. Elena's eyes moved to the piano in the corner, then back to her son's worried face. I can't leave without my piano, and you know we can't take it with us. So I'll stay here and keep it safe until you come back. The argument continued for hours. Marina cried, Pavel pleaded. Even Anya tried to convince her grandmother to come with them. But Elena remained stubborn, and eventually they realized she wouldn't change her mind. The family decided to stay together no matter what happened. That night, the sounds got much closer. The building shook so hard that pictures fell off the walls and dishes rattled in the cabinets. Anya huddled between her parents on the couch, covering her ears while her grandmother hummed lullabies that could barely be heard over the noise outside. Around midnight, there was a sound unlike anything they had heard before. It was louder than thunder, brighter than lightning, and it seemed to come from right next door. The entire building lurched sideways like a ship in a storm. Windows exploded inward, covering everything in glittering pieces. The lights went out permanently. In the sudden, terrible silence that followed, Anya could hear her heart beating in her ears. Dust filled the air so thick it was hard to breathe. Her father's voice cut through the darkness, calling everyone's name one by one. Marina? Anya? Mama? They were all alive, but Elena's voice sounded weak when she answered. Something heavy had fallen on her leg, and she couldn't move without help. Pavel used his phone's flashlight to assess the damage, and what he saw made him gasp. Their home was destroyed. The wall facing the street had a huge hole in it, and chunks of concrete lay scattered across the floor. The kitchen was buried under debris from the ceiling. Their furniture was broken and overturned. Everything they owned was covered in dust and rubble, but somehow, impossibly, the piano was still standing. Its bench was knocked over, and pieces of plaster covered its keys, but the instrument itself had survived. It stood in its corner like a miracle, battered but unbroken. Waiting patiently for someone to play it again, Elena saw it too, and despite her injury and the chaos around them, she smiled. "You see," she whispered to Anya, "music is stronger than we think. It survives when everything else falls apart." They spent the rest of the night in the basement with other families from their building, sharing blankets and water and whatever food they had managed to grab. Elena's injury was serious, but the local hospital was no longer operating. All they could do was make her as comfortable as possible and hope for the best. As dawn broke through the holes in their building, Anya looked up at what remained of their home and saw her piano silhouetted against the gray sky. In that moment, she made a promise to herself and to her grandmother. No matter what happened next, she would not let the music die. 3 days had passed since Elena closed her eyes for the last time. She had held on as long as she could, whispering stories about the piano and humming melodies that only she could remember. In her final moments, she had squeezed Anya's hand and made her promise something that seemed impossible at the time. "Don't let the music die, little one," she had whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of destruction. "Promise me you'll keep playing no matter what happens around us." Anya had nodded through her tears, not really understanding what her grandmother meant. How could she play piano when their world was falling apart? How could there be music when everything beautiful had been destroyed? The basement where they had been living with other families felt smaller each day. Children cried when they were hungry, which was most of the time now. Adults spoke in whispers, sharing whatever news they could gather from broken radios and phones that rarely worked. The air was thick with dust and sadness, and everyone moved like ghosts of their former selves. Anya's parents had grown quiet since Elena's death. Marina would stare at the ceiling for hours, lost in memories of better times. Pavel would disappear for long periods, searching for food or medicine or any sign that help might be coming. When he returned, his face would be older than when he left, as if each trip outside aged him by months. On the third morning after the funeral, Anya woke up with a strange feeling in her chest. It was like a pull, calling her somewhere she needed to go. She looked around the basement at the sleeping families, at her parents who were finally getting some rest, and she knew what she had to do. She climbed the dangerous stairs to their apartment, stepping carefully over broken concrete and twisted metal. The building groaned and creaked with each step, and she could see the sky through holes in the walls. Everything smelled like smoke and dust, and the silence was so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing when she reached their floor. Anya saw their front door hanging crooked on its hinges. She pushed it open and stepped into what used to be her home. The morning light streaming through the damaged walls made everything look different, like a photograph that had been torn and put back together wrong. But there, in the corner where it had always been, stood the piano. It looked like it had been through a battle, which she supposed it had. Its wooden case was blackened with soot, and several keys were chipped or missing entirely. The bench lay overturned nearby, covered in chunks of plaster and broken glass. Anya walked toward it slowly, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice telling her to sit up straight, to keep her wrists curved, to feel the music before she played it. The memories were so strong they made her eyes water. She carefully moved the debris from around the piano, piece by piece. Some of the chunks of concrete were heavy, and she had to drag them rather than lift them. Her hands got dirty and cut from the sharp edges, but she didn't stop. This was something she had to do. When she finally cleared enough space, she turned the bench right side up and sat down. The seat was covered in dust, and the piano keys looked like broken teeth in a giant's mouth. But when she placed her hands in the familiar position, muscle memory took over. Her fingers knew exactly where to go. She started with scales, the way her grandmother had taught her. The sound that came from the damaged piano was unlike anything she had ever heard. Some notes were completely silent where keys were missing. Others rang out with a hollow, haunting tone that seemed to echo from somewhere deep inside the broken instrument. But slowly, carefully, she began to play the Chopin waltz that Elena had loved so much. The melody was broken and strange, full, of gaps where notes should have been. But somehow it was still beautiful. Maybe even more beautiful than before, because now it carried the weight of everything they had lost and everything they were fighting to keep. As she played, Anya felt her grandmother's presence in the room. She could almost see Elena sitting in her favorite chair, eyes closed, conducting with her weathered hands. The music filled the damaged apartment with something that transcended the destruction around them. It was hope, memory, and love all mixed together in a song that refused to be silenced. What Anya didn't know was that someone else was listening too. James Mitchell, a journalist from England, had been documenting the destruction in their neighborhood. He was a man who had covered many difficult stories around the world, but this assignment was wearing on him in ways he hadn't expected. He had been walking through the rubble-filled streets, taking photographs of damaged buildings and interviewing survivors when he could find them. The story he was trying to tell was about the cost of conflict, about ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. But he was struggling to find the right words, the right images that would help people far away understand what was happening here. Then he heard it. Piano music, floating through the air like something from a dream. At first, he thought he was imagining it. How could there be music in a place like this? But as he followed the sound, it grew stronger and more real. The melody led him to a building that looked like it might collapse at any moment. He climbed carefully through the debris, following the haunting notes until he found their source. And there, in a destroyed apartment, he saw something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. A small girl in a torn dress was sitting at a charred piano, her back straight and her hands moving across the keys with surprising grace. Her face was serious and peaceful, as if she were performing in a grand concert hall instead of a war zone. The music she was creating was broken but beautiful, sad but hopeful, destroyed but somehow still alive. James stood in the doorway, hardly daring to breathe. He had seen many things in his years as a journalist, but this was something different. This was a moment when the human spirit refused to be crushed, when art survived against all odds, when a child's courage became a light in the darkness. He slowly reached for his camera, moving carefully so as not to disturb the girl's concentration. The video he captured was only a few minutes long, but it contained something powerful enough to change the world. He filmed Anya playing her grandmother's favorite waltz on the damaged piano, her small figure silhouetted against the broken walls, creating beauty in the midst of destruction. When she finished playing, Anya sat quietly for a moment, her hands still resting on the keys. She felt different somehow, as if she had kept a promise that was bigger than she understood. The music had filled the empty spaces in her heart, and for the first time since her grandmother's death, she felt like she could breathe again. James approached her carefully, introducing himself in the few words of her language that he knew. Anya looked up at him with eyes that seemed older than her years, and she smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real, and it told him everything he needed to know about the power of hope. Neither of them realized that this moment would soon be seen by millions of people around the world. They couldn't know that this simple act of playing music would become a symbol of resilience that would inspire countless others. All they knew was that in this destroyed apartment, surrounded by the ruins of a former life, something beautiful had happened, something that proved music really could survive anything. James Mitchell sat in his makeshift office that evening, staring at the video on his camera's small screen. He had filmed many stories during his career as a journalist, but this was different. His hands were actually shaking as he watched the footage of Anya playing her grandmother's piano in the ruins of her home. The video was only 3 minutes long, but it contained something that words couldn't capture. The image of a small girl creating beauty in the middle of destruction, her serious face concentrated on the music while broken walls crumbled around her, seemed to sum up everything he had been trying to say about the human spirit. He had been struggling to find the right way to tell this story. How do you help people who live in safety understand what it's like when your whole world falls apart? How do you make them care about strangers in a faraway place? But this little girl had done something that all his words couldn't do. She had shown the world what hope looks like. James uploaded the video to his social media accounts with a simple caption, In the heart of destruction, music lives on. This brave little girl plays her grandmother's piano in their destroyed home. Her courage reminds us that beauty can survive even the darkest times. At first, nothing happened. The video sat there with just a few views from his followers. James went to bed thinking it might be another story that wouldn't reach the people who needed to see it. But the internet has a way of finding the stories that matter most. By morning, everything had changed. James woke up to hundreds of notifications on his phone. The video had been shared by a famous musician who had seen it on his timeline. Then another musician shared it, then a popular actress. Then thousands of ordinary people who were moved by what they saw. The numbers kept growing. 1,000 views became 10,000. 10,000 became 50,000. By the end of the first day, over 1 million people had watched Anya play her broken piano. The comments section was filled with messages in dozens of languages, but they all said the same thing. This little girl had touched their hearts. Dr. Rodriguez, a piano teacher in Spain, watched the video with tears streaming down her face. She immediately shared it with her students, telling them, "This is why we play music. Not for fame or money, but because music is hope made into sound." In Japan, an elderly man named Mr. Tanaka saw the video and remembered his own childhood. During difficult times, he had learned to play piano as a boy, and music had helped him through the hardest moments of his life. He donated money to help children affected by conflict. Inspired by Anya's courage, a group of teenagers in Canada started a fundraising campaign at their school after watching the video. They organized a concert where students played piano pieces, dedicating each song to children around the world who were facing hard times. They raised enough money to send instruments to 3 different schools in areas recovering from disasters. The video reached people in the most unexpected places. A construction worker in Brazil watched it during his lunch break and called his daughter to tell her he loved her. A doctor in India saw it between surgeries and was reminded why she had chosen to help people heal. A teacher in Nigeria showed it to her class, and they spent the whole day talking about courage and kindness. Famous musicians began making their own videos in response. A world-renowned pianist recorded herself playing the same Chopin waltz that Anya had played, dedicating it to the little girl who showed us that music is stronger than anything that tries to destroy it. An orchestra in Vienna announced they would perform a special concert in honor of Anya and her grandmother. The London Symphony Orchestra followed with their own tribute performance. Soon, concert halls around the world were holding benefit concerts. Using music to raise money and awareness for people affected by conflict, the hashtag #PianoInTheRubble began trending on social media platforms. People shared their own stories of how music had helped them through difficult times. Musicians posted videos of themselves playing in unusual places, showing that music could exist anywhere hope was needed, but it wasn't just musicians who were inspired. Artists created paintings based on the video. Writers wrote poems about the power of music to heal. Photographers shared images of musical instruments surviving in damaged places around the world. Anya's 3-minute video had started a worldwide conversation about resilience, hope, and the things that make us human. News organizations began calling James, wanting to know more about the little girl in the video. Television reporters asked if they could interview her. Radio stations wanted to tell her story. But James was careful about protecting Anya's privacy. He shared only what was necessary to help people understand her situation, always remembering that she was a child who had already been through too much. The video reached people in positions of power too. Politicians began talking about the humanitarian crisis in ways they hadn't before. The image of Anya at her piano became a symbol that helped people understand what was at stake when communities were destroyed. Aid organizations reported an increase in donations after the video went viral. People who had never given money to help strangers before were moved to contribute. The simple act of a little girl playing piano had opened hearts and wallets around the world. In schools everywhere, teachers began showing the video to their students. It became a lesson about courage, about finding hope in dark times, about the power of art to bring people together. Children wrote letters to Anya, drew pictures for her, and promised to practice their own musical instruments with more dedication. One music teacher in Australia told her students, "This little girl shows us that music isn't just something pretty to listen to. It's a way of fighting back against anything that tries to make the world darker. Every time you play an instrument, you're adding light to the world." The video was translated into dozens of languages, but the music needed no translation. People from every continent, every culture, every background could understand what Anya was saying through her broken piano. She was saying that beauty matters, that art matters, that refusing to give up matters. Religious leaders from different faiths began referencing the video in their sermons, talking about how this child had shown them something about the divine spark that exists in every human being. They spoke about how music could be a form of prayer, a way of reaching toward something greater than ourselves. Even people who had never cared about classical music found themselves moved by the story. The video showed them that music wasn't about being fancy or educated, it was about being human. It was about the need to create something beautiful, even when everything around you is falling apart. Social media influencers with millions of followers shared the video, not because it would get them more likes or views, but because they genuinely felt it was important. For once, the internet was being used to spread something purely good, something that reminded people of their better angels. As the video continued to spread around the world, James realized that he had captured something much bigger than a news story. He had documented a moment when one small person's courage had inspired millions of others to remember what really matters in life. The little girl, playing a broken piano in a destroyed apartment, had reminded the world that hope is unbreakable, that art is unstoppable, and that the human spirit can create beauty even in the darkest of times. The offers started coming in within days of the video going viral. Musicians from around the world wanted to help Anya and her family. A famous piano company promised to replace her grandmother's damaged instrument with a brand new grand piano. Music schools in safe countries offered full scholarships. Wealthy individuals pledged money for her education and her family's future, but the most meaningful offer came from a music academy in Warsaw, Poland. The director, Mrs. Kowalski, had been a refugee herself as a child during World War II. She understood what it meant to lose everything and start over in a new place. Her school specialized in helping talented young musicians who had faced difficult circumstances. "We don't just want to teach her piano," Mrs. Kowalski explained in a video call with James, who had become like a bridge between Anya's family and the outside world. "We want to give her a home where music can heal her heart while she grows into the artist she's meant to become." The decision wasn't easy for Pavel and Marina. Leaving their homeland, even their destroyed homeland, felt like giving up on everything they had ever known. But when they saw how Anya's eyes lit up at the mention of continuing her musical education, they knew what they had to do. The journey to Poland was complicated and took several weeks to arrange. There were papers to sign, officials to meet, and countless small details to work out. During this time, Anya returned to her broken piano every day. Word had spread through their neighborhood about the viral video, and people would gather quietly outside the damaged building to listen to her play. Mrs. Petrova, their elderly neighbor who had survived the destruction, would bring her a thermos of hot tea each afternoon. "Play the Chopin again, little one," she would request. "It reminds me that beautiful things can survive anything." Other neighbors brought small gifts, an apple here, a piece of bread there, whatever they could spare. The music had become a source of comfort for everyone in their shattered community. When the day finally came to leave, Anya stood in front of her grandmother's piano one last time. The damaged instrument had become famous around the world, but to her, it was still just the piano where Elena had taught her to love music. She played the Chopin waltz one final time, and this time she wasn't alone. Several neighbors had gathered to listen, and some hummed along with the melody they had come to know by heart. "Will you be okay without me?" she whispered to the piano. As if it were an old friend she was leaving behind. Pavel knelt down beside his daughter and placed his hand on the scarred wood. "This piano has done its job," he said softly. It kept the music alive when everything else was falling apart. Now, it's time for you to carry that music forward. The community had decided that the piano would stay where it was, protected and preserved as a reminder of what had happened there. Local artists volunteered to build a small shelter around it, creating an informal memorial where people could come to remember and reflect. The piano that had once filled a family's apartment with joy had become a symbol of hope for an entire neighborhood. The flight to Poland was Anya's first time on an airplane. She pressed her face against the window, watching the landscape change. Below them, as they crossed the border into their new country, Marina squeezed her hand and said, "Grandmother Elena would be so proud of you. You kept your promise to her." The Music Academy in Warsaw was unlike anything Anya had ever seen. The building was old but beautifully maintained, with practice rooms that had perfect acoustics and pianos that gleamed like mirrors. Students from many different countries walked the halls, each carrying their own story of how music had brought them to this place. Mrs. Kowalski personally welcomed Anya and her family. She was a small woman with kind eyes and hands that moved gracefully when she spoke, just like Elena's had. "Music brought you here," she told Anya on their first day. "But you'll discover that it can take you anywhere you want to go." Anya's new piano teacher was a gentleman named Professor Novak, who had been teaching for 40 years. When he first heard her play, he sat quietly for a long moment afterward. "You play with your heart, not just your fingers," he said finally. "That's something very special. We'll help you develop your technique, but we'll never change what makes your music so real." The adjustment to their new life wasn't always easy. Pavel found work at a construction company, using his skills to help build homes instead of seeing them destroyed. Marina learned Polish while working at a local bakery, where her warm smile quickly made her popular with customers. They lived in a small apartment near the academy, and while it wasn't as familiar as their old home, it felt safe for Anya. The biggest challenge was learning to play on pianos that worked perfectly. After months with her grandmother's damaged instrument, having all the keys respond properly felt strange at first. But gradually she began to appreciate the full range of sounds available to her. Her music became richer and more complex, though it never lost the emotional depth that had made her famous. The story of her journey continued to inspire people around the world. The scholarship fund established in Elena's name grew large enough to help dozens of other young musicians who had faced hardships. Music schools in several countries created programs specifically for refugee children, recognizing that art could be a powerful tool for healing and integration. A year after her arrival in Poland, Anya gave her first formal concert. The small auditorium was packed with people from many different countries who had followed her story. When she walked onto the stage and sat at the beautiful grand piano, the audience fell completely silent. She began with scales, just as her grandmother had taught her, then moved into the Chopin waltz that had started everything. But this time, all the notes were there. The melody flowed complete and perfect, carrying with it the memory of Elena, the love of her family, and the hope of everyone who had been touched by her story. As she played, Anya thought about her grandmother's words. "Music is the language of the soul. It speaks when words cannot." The audience didn't need to understand her language or know her full story to understand what her music was saying. It spoke of loss and love, of destruction and rebuilding, of the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. After the concert, a young girl approached Anya shyly. She was about the same age and had recently arrived from another country where her family had faced difficulties. "I saw your video," she said in broken English. "It made me want to learn piano too. Can music really help when you're sad?" Anya smiled and nodded. "Music doesn't take the sadness away," she said, remembering something Elena had once told her. "But it helps carry it. And sometimes, when you're carrying sadness with music, it becomes something beautiful instead of just something heavy." Today, Anya continues her studies at the academy. She has become fluent in Polish and has made friends from around the world. Her parents have built a new life in their adopted country, though they still dream of returning home someday when it's safe. The damaged piano remains in Mariupol, now protected by a small shelter that has become an unofficial monument. People still visit it, leaving flowers or simply sitting quietly nearby. Some play a few notes when they think no one is watching. The instrument that once filled one family's home with music has become a place where an entire community can remember and hope. Every year on the anniversary of Elena's death, Anya performs a special concert in her grandmother's memory. She always ends with the Chopin Waltz, played exactly as Elena taught her. The music carries forward the legacy of a woman who believed that beauty could survive anything, performed by a granddaughter who proved her right. Anya's story reminds the world that even in humanity's darkest moments, there are always people willing to create something beautiful. Her courage didn't just move millions of people, it showed them that hope is not just a feeling, but an action. Every time someone chooses to make music instead of noise, to build instead of destroy, to love instead of hate, they honor the promise that Anya made to her grandmother in a destroyed apartment. The little girl who played a charred piano in a war zone grew up to become exactly what Elena always knew she would be, a musician who uses her gift to remind the world that no matter how broken things become, there is always a way to make them sing again.